No hair, don't care. Let's do a thing. Beans is good. Hey everyone, I'm Jay Carter at Jabbergluck on Twitter, and you're listening to Jabber Jibber. We're talking about mages. What's a mage? We'll talk about it. So in the Grimoire campaign setting, you have 5 different levels of corporeality. You have intelligence, will, spirit, a physical form, and then you have glory. So your intelligence is the source of your mind. It's the source of your ability to gather information, organize it, differentiate between it. People who use magic relating to intelligence are mages. Those are the people who learn it, who memorize, who figure out academically how to make it work. They treat magic like an energy source, and they formulaically decide how to use it to best achieve the effects that they're looking for. Mages go to school. Mages take classes. They read books. They write their own grimoire. And this is the name of the campaign setting itself. Because in my opinion, I feel like the idea of spellbooks has not really been delved into very deeply. I feel that just saying a wizard has a spellbook really is not that in depth. You just, okay, I write my spells down. I refer to those spells. That's great. But where did that spellbook come from? Who created the first one? Who generated these things? Are they formulaic because you wrote them? Are they formulaic because somebody else wrote them? How does that work? So in my mind, the grimoire is the idea of a handwritten, customized spellbook. It's something that a person writes because they need to. It's like a documentation of their own magical experiments. And the way that one person does magic is not going to be identical to the way another person does magic. For example, there's a number of different ways that you can teleport. If you were to use warp magic, you could physically pull 2 positions in space together, have them overlap in the form of a portal, and pass through from one location to another. Alternatively, you could just simply cause your physical form to become very pliable, thin, and move through space at an increased speed and by passing through very little actual space that you appear in another location. That teleportation spell wouldn't include actually bending space. You're doing nothing to space. You're actually manipulating your own body, transferring it, say, into energy and having it reassemble someplace else. So this is the difference, let's say, between the game Portal and Star Trek. In Portal, they're creating an actual trans-dimensional location that is shared between 2 different spots. You're saying this spot is now in both this location and this location. Whereas the teleportation concept in Star Trek is going to actually disassemble your atoms and reassemble them someplace else. So magic is like that. When you have a grimoire, you're actually deciding, how am I going to accomplish this task? How am I going to make this thing happen? And that's one of the reasons why I feel like wizards need more room to customize. They need more room to say, this is something that I do in a different way than somebody else does. So to that end, we are going to talk about mages a little more. Right now, you know what a mage is, and we'll talk about what kinds of mages there are. Ooh. Okay, so we've talked about what a mage is. A mage is someone who uses intelligence to access magic, who formulaically decides how to use the potential for matter and energy, or mana, in a way that accomplishes a specific task, even if that method is different between one mage and another. Now let's talk about the different kinds of mages. In my campaign setting, I've gone ahead and leaned into the spheres within the Spheres of Power supplement from Drop Dead Studios. They've broken it down into alteration, conjuration, creation, dark, death, destruction, divination, enhancement, fate, illusion, life, light, mind, nature, protection, telekinesis, time, war, warp, and weather. And you'll notice I actually have 2 war categories. We'll get to that. All of these spheres are described in the Spheres of Power Magic Supplement. We don't need to get into them right now, but the concept is that every mage is going to be studying one or more spheres. They're going to probably have more of a pantologist's view of magic when they go through the academy. They're going to learn every single sphere. They're going to learn about some spheres without really practicing some of them very much, death being an example and war being another. In my campaign setting, death and war were both outlawed, pretty typical for a civilization to outlaw those kinds of magic, but it's for a purpose. Specifically, as far as death is concerned, they were sanctioned by the Wizards Tribunal, but then they delved into practices of spiritual manipulation, seeking to extend life or circumvent death by any means necessary, and they basically got in trouble for spiritual slavery. Like, there was a certain amount of expectation there that if you were to practice death magic, it would be consensual. It would be, that you wouldn't be hurting anybody in the meantime. The death mages were shut down basically because they were ignoring the Wizard's Creed, which prohibited that kind of stuff after a bit. The war sphere also was outlawed, and that was because the Wizards Tribunal, after the Cataclysm, wanted to avoid another world-level arcane conflict. The world Athanasia that the Grimoire campaign setting takes place in is a relatively new world. The civilized history only records back to about 400 years ago, and that was when the human kingdom of Eusoria was started. Now, prior to that, that is to say 400 years ago, there was a cataclysm. There was a world-shattering event where the whole world was split down the middle and the top sort of north axis was thrown into space and became the moon. Prior to that, there was a war and a world-level arcane conflict that the Wizards Tribunal was essentially trying to stop. But when it looked like that wouldn't happen, this cataclysm occurred, essentially saving everyone. It reset the planet. It was a nigh extinction level event. But those who survived basically were so focused on their own survival, they didn't have the resources to stick around and try and fight each other anymore. So in the meantime, the Wizards Tribunal was set up. They basically said, look, we can't do this again. We cannot practice war. Insert whatever comments you want about ain't going to practice war no more. Anyway, so the war guild and the death guild were both outlawed, but everything else is taught practically. Everyone learns how to change their shape. Everyone learns how to make a contract with eldritch powers and summon those beings to help them, and so on. When you start, you're a scholar magician. You go to the academy, you learn, and then if you graduate, you basically apply to become a member of a guild. After you're in the guild, you are called a guild mage. You are a professional magic user, and the person in charge of the guild is called the archmage. The guild mage then is a professional magic user. They go around and they perform practical tasks. They provide goods and services to the community. An archmage then is over the guild. They head up that particular branch of magic, that particular sphere, and they're able to sort of get jobs. They contract clients to have them provide services. What happens if you go to the academy and you flunk out? What happens if you never go to the academy? Are you just stuck? Not necessarily. So we know what a mage is, and we know what kinds of mages there are. Mages go to a school, an academy, where they learn magic. They're taught to practically use all of the spheres of magic with the exception of 2. 1, death, because spiritual slavery has been outlawed. 2, war, because the Wizards Tribunal did not want another world-level arcane conflict. So all of the other spheres are available to anyone to learn. Go to the academy, you can learn how to do that. If you graduate, you become a guild mage. Let's talk about those people who are not guildmages. There is an entire group of mages who are not part of a guild. They're called the freemages. So I've characterized them here. They are the duelist, enchanter, pantologist, planeswalker, and then tower guards for melee and ranged options. The duelists are people who became so good at combat magic, or who really liked war magic and were really good at it, but since they were outlawed from using it, they essentially applied their skills to arena combat. They're gladiators, magical gladiators. Duelists are professional entertainers. They use their magic in a way that is showy and flashy, but is very, very effective in combat. Enchanters are going to be probably two different kinds of people. One, it's going to be the kind of person who can just put magic into an object and make it work. Somebody who can enchant a hammer to tap on something and repair it. Someone who can make a saw that cuts twice as fast so your arm doesn't have to work so hard. The other kind is the alchemist. This is the more traditional kind. The kind that goes around and makes healing potions, who makes potions that can help people in their jobs, make them stronger, make them faster. Things that make life easier. So you've got your alchemists and then your enchanters. Those people are going to be staples in the magical community, even if they're not part of a guild. Then you've got your pantologists. The pantologist studies arcane theory, all within the Wizard's Creed. You're not doing any death magic, you're not doing any more magic, but you know pretty much everything about everything else. You're probably looking for an opportunity to publish your own grimoire as a textbook and then get a professorship at a magical academy. Or maybe you're shooting for being a wizard. Maybe you already know so much that you don't want to be in the system. You want to be outside of the system. You want to be above the system. Then there's the planeswalkers. These people are specifically arranged by the Wizards Tribunal to go out and communicate with the other planes, to basically establish treaties, diplomatic relations, make sure that everything's okay. So they might go into the Genium, the place where intelligences live, and say, would you mind if we borrow your djinn? Would you mind if we talked to your Merid? Would it be okay if we summoned 12 elementals on this date? That kind of thing. The Tower Guard is going to be the people who watch after the Wizards Tribunal or any of its remote locations. So you might have a Tower Guard who is trained in magic, that'll be your basic Eldritch Knight, or somebody who actually protects the place from above, that's your Arcane Archer. There are lots of other things that we could discuss about these, but we'll pause there for now and come back to them on another day. So, we've learned what mages are. They're scholar magicians who study. We've learned what freemages are. They are mages who don't join guilds and still work under the Wizard's Creed. Now, let's talk about the hedgemage. So a hedgemage is someone who probably never joined the academy, or if they did, they flunked out or left intentionally. They aren't a free mage. They're not following the Wizard's Creed per se. They're not technically under the jurisdiction of the Wizard's Creed because they haven't made any creed. They're just somebody who learns, usually on their own, self-taught, how to use magic. And there are several types of hedgemages. Any magic user, though, who might want to conduct magical experiments or practice magic academically outside of the Wizard's Creed would be a hedgemage. So even if you're maybe proficient with the death sphere or the war sphere, because those aren't sanctioned, that would make you a hedgemage. Specific kinds of hedgemages would include your mage right, which is an amazing NPC stat block found in Eberron, Rising from the Last War. They have an awesome block here in the back where you can just create a mage right. So you can be an artisan, an entertainer, a healer, a lamplighter, a locksmith, a mediator, a medium, or an oracle. They all come with their own appropriate spells and proficiencies. So the artisan, for example, comes with one type of artisan's tools. The entertainer comes with proficiency in performance. Healer comes with proficiency in medicine, and so on. It's the kind of thing you would expect from a magical professional. This would, in the Grimoire campaign setting, represent any person who was just a professional, someone who provides a good or service, but incorporates magical concepts. So a healer, for example, would be able to incorporate some minor healing magic. An artisan like a blacksmith, for example, would be proficient with blacksmith tools, but also incorporate some magic into there as well. The arcane theorist is actually going to be very similar to our pantologist from the freemage category. So it'll be a lore bard, but in this case, they're operating outside the wizard's creed. So the arcane theorist is going to be looking for maybe just anything that magic can do on an academic level. The familiarist is somebody who has taken the concept of a wizard's familiar to the highest level. Someone who, for example, doesn't have one familiar, but all of the familiars. This is the Swarm Keeper Ranger template, and we conceptualize the swarm as their collection of magical spirits. The Plane Stalker, again, very similar to the Planes Walker, is a Horizon Walker Ranger, but they would be unsanctioned explorers. You can see that there are several examples here where it parallels the free mage. This is just, again, a group of people who are not necessarily operating under the wizard's creed. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily good or evil or anything else, just that they don't subscribe to the system, so to speak. They're probably more neutral or chaotic than anything. Your spell swords, then, are not like your tower guards. They are mercenaries. They are magical folk for hire. So you would encounter your spell swords in scenarios where people just need to know magic to deal with magical threats. And if you hire them, they will apply their magical knowledge to the job that you hire them for. That's it. That's the mage. We've talked about all the different varieties. The guild mage who studies specific spheres and specializes in one of them when they join a guild. The archmage, the more advanced version of the guild mage, who's in charge of the guild and potentially might be working their way up the ladder to wizard or a professorship at an academy of some kind. You've got your free mages who don't join guilds but are still under the wizard's creed. They perform magical services for the community. Then you've got your hedgemages who aren't part of the system, study magic however they want to, and basically just live their lives however they can, get by. They're professionals, but they don't really subscribe to the rules that the Wizards Tribunal imposes on the community. So thanks so much for joining me, guys. This has been fun. I hope I get another chance to talk to you about the different kinds of magic users in my Grimoire campaign setting. If you liked this, come on back for part 2, where we discuss the Wonder Kind. We'll see you then. Feeling good about this take.